Going to be going live on Facebook. All right. We're good? Feeling it too. We're good? We're live. Ladies and gentlemen, 5G. The US just earned a knockout over China. Yet, it had to do entirely with Europe and Germany. We're going to talk about why the United States of America is going to be the world's leader in 5G, why the recent European Union investigations is going to lead to the decimate? Not the decimalization, the decimation of the Chinese Huawei 5G market. I am Mark Melnick. This is the Newsbeat Show. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Newsbeat Show. We've seen a lot of talk about 5G. I mean, we T3's Newsbeat Room has earned exclusive interviews with the Inseego CFO and Executive Vice President of Inseego, which I believe is going to be a world leader in 5G. But there was something that came out last night that I don't think a lot of people were focusing on. It came out of the South China Morning Post, one of the, if not the biggest newspaper down there in China. And it basically talks about Germany warning about 5G attacks by nation states and veiled criticism of Beijing and Huawei. And I'll explain what I mean by veiled criticism. The comments are for our European Commission risk assessment evaluation. So the EU, the European Commission, did a risk assessment evaluation, and it was spurred by the rising concern about potential 5G data breaches. European source says Berlin is obviously, which is capital of Germany, Berlin. And just if you don't know the power of Germany in the European Union, Germany is the gold standard in the European Union. Whatever Germany does, most of the other countries try to emulate and copy. Germany is sort of the unspoken top dog of the European Union when it comes to things like this. And a European source says Berlin, when they're warning of these 5G attacks, is obviously referring to China and, of course, Huawei, given the company is the biggest concern for Europe. So, in Germany, what European diplomats yesterday called veiled criticism of Beijing and Chinese telecom giant Huawei Technologies warned of cybersecurity attacks that could be launched by nation states or nation backed actors on future 5G networks within the EU or European Union. The German government made those comments in a national risk assessment exercise conducted by the European Commission, spurred by growing public concern over the potential for attacks on networks, devices, programs, and data linked to superfast 5G or fifth generation data transmission, which is 5G. Um, so, an article coming out of the South China Morning Post, the SCMP, anytime there's any headline coming out in China, it generally comes out of the South China Morning Post. A European diplomatic source told the South China Morning Post that it's obvious that the German government is referring to Huawei in China, given that the company is the leading player in 5G and the current biggest concern for Europe. And I'm going to talk a little about what this is going to entail to my thoughts on the entire article and why people cannot fall asleep on this one. This is the official knockout blow to Huawei. We all knew that Huawei was not going to do really much in the United States. We all knew that United States 5G companies were not going to do much in China. But for the rest of the world, where the majority of the population is, we didn't really exactly know how hard Huawei would go and whatnot in terms of expanding their reach. So we know the US China trade war talks a lot about Huawei. We know the US China trade war talks about China demanding that we ease restrictions on Huawei. And if you remember, there was an article that came from the CEO of Huawei saying that they would allow people to rewrite the code on Huawei systems to avoid potential fears of these breaches. So the European Union came out with this right now, and it's an article just right over here, and it basically within this article here, it is basically showing the fear behind it. If you look at the South China Morning Post, it's in their politics section. And I want to talk a little bit more, not just about the article. The article, I think, is pretty self explanatory, but what can actually happen? What this is basically doing is we all heard that Poland agreed to use the 5G networks. Not a big deal. Poland, not the biggest country, not the smallest, didn't really speak for the entire European Union. But when you sort of have the ringleader of the European Union saying that there's safety concerns with the 5G, it basically just it to me it all but guarantees that everybody in the European Union, or again Europe, Italy, um, will Brexit happen? Maybe Italy, England, whatever, all the European countries, Germany, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, are going to be using United States of America. We're going to be using US 5G technology. This is extremely bullish, not just for Verizon, AT&T, which is going to come up inside the European Union in all the member countries and just clean house, but it's also going to be phenomenally positive right here for Inseego. And here's the beauty about it. We've already seen Inseego running again. We did interview the CFO. The stock's up about 25% ever since we interviewed the CFO recently back on August 21st. So what's today? September 20th. So exactly like 1 month ago, we interviewed the CFO of Inseego. And this is going to basically in English allow Inseego to lock down more contracts in the European Union space. And again, we're talking about the EU is a large member group of countries, obviously. And Seago is going to have no issues locking down these contracts. What basically happened here, the funny thing is Germany just removed all the competitors for the United States of America because you only had two real players. You only had two real players in 5G, China, United States. And all the other countries didn't have to funnel all this money and resources into the technology because they were just going to buy them from either China or the United States. However, with high speed data, there were security risks in the Chinese software. And what? Let's not play stupid. Huawei did this very intentionally so they could dominate the world stage in terms of internet connectivity. And then, of course, dominate the internet and all the data processing that goes through it, as well as manipulate it. I've been hearing through the Huawei products that Huawei or China would be able to literally shut down all the 5G systems from their hardware. If you were to literally use Huawei's hardware at the as far as we know, at the click of a button, China would be able to just shut down every single system and just make the entire internet go dark for everybody on a 5G network. So with this German assessment of risk, this basically just remove your competitor. To give you an example, I want to give you an example of what this is like in terms of the future. 5G is going to be everywhere. Whether you think it's unhealthy, like I do, or whether you think it's not, whether you think there's health risk concern with being next to a 5G tower or not, it's going to happen, the bottom line, and it's going to dominate the world. It's just a matter of when, not if. So, to give you an analogy of how I see of what just happened for Encego, imagine that you ever drive down. I don't know if you've ever been down in New Jersey or maybe there's other places like that as well, where you see like a bunch of auto dealerships next to each other, and you're driving down like either a highway or a long street, and there's like a bunch of auto dealerships right next to each other. Have you guys ever, seen that in your states? I don't know, where you have like a lot of like auto dealerships on like the same the the same avenue here. A China delegation, the stocks are falling now as a China delegate cancels trip to Montana to visit farms. So people might be interpreting this that a farm visit was canceled, so maybe that could be bad for the U.S.-China trade war. Completely overblown overreaction here with the market, if you're wondering my thoughts. Okay. Ironically, hold on. Ironically, the Q's flushed underneath our algo support here and bounced a little. Okay. Back to what I was saying. To give you an idea, it's almost as if you own a pizzeria and basically the government comes out and says every other pizzeria that's not yours has to shut down because there's health risks associated with it. You know what kind of business that would bring to your pizzeria? And a company like Inseego right now is going to literally have the ability to just swoop contracts left and right. So I did have a $15 target on Inseego. I will be raising it to 17 and a half now. This news to me basically just short of guarantees that Huawei and their product and service is either phenomenally compromised at best or will be disregarded completely at worst um, for the entire European Union. And things like this are going to bring contracts, deals for Inseego's technology to break into these countries without even having to compete with Huawei. This is what we call monopolization. When there are two major competitors to bring your products within a country and one competitor gets shot in the foot, it pretty much creates a monopoly if these countries want to step in and use 5G products. Inseego will be one of the major benefactors of this monopoly. So I just wanted to share that with you. I thought it was very major news. I think people are taking it um, a little bit lightly here. Back to my dealership analogy. It's imagine every other dealership, every car dealership in your state closed with the exception of yours. That's the best way I could really portray this in Seago here because it allows people to not really choose um, a different product. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the pricing scale works. I mean, they can pretty much dictate their own price. American companies can dictate their own price now to Europe. There's no competition. If there was one place in the world to buy a car, it's not like you're going to go somewhere else and get a car for cheaper. There's only one place in the world to get it. And that's what it feels like right now with that article coming out of Germany with the risk assessment. To me, it's just short of inevitable that every single European company follows through and pretty much, is forced if they want 5G technology to go to American companies. I hope you guys enjoyed this little 5G analysis here. This is a US knockout over China. It's kind of weird because it sort of pulls out the bargaining chip that, it pulls away the bargaining chip, and what China actually wanted out of the US China trade war was to not have the United States talk about the compromised product. The only way Huawei is going to do this is if they allow open source coding into their hardware, and open source basically allowing the countries to, program their 5G networks however they deem fit. And this is going to just be a phenomenal blow to the Chinese. And it really takes off one of the main bargaining chips that the Chinese was trying to push for in this US China trade war deal. It'll be very interesting to see how this drama unfolds. I hope you guys enjoyed this Newsbeat show. Happy trading, make money, and we'll see you guys here on the Newsbeat live trading broadcast. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening and weekend.